intro of this video, while I'm giving you a little first-person POV, I'm showcasing the unpleasant look of the weeds in the front of my house. While I hand pull the weeds, I'm going to be starting the conversation about how we can turn weeds into something that we can use to our benefit. Right now, I'm just still ripping out a lot of these weeds because this is cleaning up the front of my house, the side of my house, the walk paths, and I'm moving these weeds to other areas for creating a fertile ground for growing in. So weeds, if you know what to do with them, if you haven't already poisoned them with pesticides, weeds are nutrients. Weeds are free fertilizer for your food. And I'm going to go start laying down the foundation for next year's growth cycle and area where I'm going to be planting a lot of food. In my front yard food forest is where this batch right here is going, but in my backyard, there's tons and tons of weeds back there. But like I said, you know, I don't mind the weeds. Regardless, I just pile them up and they become their own weed barrier, actually. The more and more you pile them on top of each other, they block the other weeds. So they become a mulch in a sense. So I just developed a philosophy, not by necessarily like hearing it, but by just seeing what's around me and just learning to become more in tune with nature and just trying to live off the land. Some people are like, okay, these are starting to go to seed. You got to throw them away. You can't use them. I use everything. Zero waste. So I just lay them down, compact them on top of each other, put more and more weeds on top of each other. If some weeds come up from where I'm growing at, I just take them out and just reconstitute them maybe somewhere else. If maybe like I put like a layer of arborist mulch on top because I don't want to see any type of weeds at all. But like these weeds right here, they will compost into the ground, on top of the ground, and will just make the soil underneath super rich, and it's going to attract a lot of beneficial insects. I'm not going to have to add any other fertilizers. So it's just more about just changing the mindset, really. Every time like I cut my grass, like that's free fertilizer. Leaves fall from the ground, that's free fertilizer. It's coming from nature, it's free fertilizer. I don't spray my land anywhere. So it's just a matter of changing the mindset. It's like, okay, this right here is going to feed the plants, the food that I'm going to eat. And then the stuff that's left over from the food that I eat, maybe like orange peels, the outsides of a watermelon, it doesn't matter. All that stuff, I put in compost bins, or I directly compost it into the soil and just give back to nature so that nature can give back to you. But it all starts with that foundation of a good nutrient-rich growing medium. So right here, some people look at it as just cleaning up the front area and just beautifying the landscape. Okay, that's all fine and well. I mean, to make your landscape look nice, if you want it to look manicured, but I don't particularly care about the highly manicured look. I'm more about the functionality of things. I'm putting this in a space where it gets decent sunlight. So I'm just working with my landscape as far as where the trees are and what gets less sunlight. I know I'm going to be planting more of my spring and fall crops. Or if I try to grow something that's more of a spring and fall crop, I'll keep that more under the tree areas, a place that gets a little less shade. So just knowing what things need more or less shade, just understanding where to put things, and then it'll start laying the foundation, laying these weeds down. When a bunch of leaves start falling, compact those leaves on top. So you'll start to naturally have a balance of nitrogen and the carbon from the leaves are going to lay on top, and I'm probably going to get way more carbon than the nitrogen I'm laying down. But the fact that this is going to lay down now and it's going to have time to die and break down. So by the time I lay the leaves on top, it won't be as nitrogen rich. So nature kind of just takes care of itself. And there's still landscape fabric under here. So that's why some of these things are coming up pretty easy. But if it doesn't come up easy, it's all good. I'm imagining, depending on how much arborist wood chips I have in my backyard that I'm not going to use for growing in, because it's now broken down and fertile enough to grow in. Whatever I'm not going to use, then maybe towards the end of the growing season, I'll come and layer this down with the arborist wood chips. But for now, I don't mind it overgrown with weeds. My wife doesn't mind it overgrown with weeds, but I think there's a level of uniformity in my town to where I can't let everything become overgrown so much, because I guess, you know, people see it as bringing down the property value of the neighborhood. So I gotta take care of it every now and then. But I like pulling the weeds when they're nice and long and it's easy to pull out. Then I'm trying to pick at little weeds. So come through, pick a lot at one time, and just reconstitute it in an area where I know I'm going to be growing in next season. But this looks like see right here, this is a prime example. This was all wood chips. So I laid down the landscape fabric maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, and it was all wood chips, like the wood chips you would get from Home Depot. And as you can see, it all broke down into what looks like soil. So nature naturally breaks down things, turns it into soil, turns it into growing medium. And how much we got? A little bit more left in this area. I'll try to take as much as I can in this one load and then show you where I'm bringing it to. Because I have an area in my front yard where I grew sunflowers this year. I just pulled out a lot of sunflowers, the stems that are still there, and the heads they've been taken off. I've harvested the seeds from the sunflowers. So some of them grew well, some of them didn't grow as well. And I could just tell by just paying attention to the soil. Some of the soil was more exposed in areas, some of it looked more degraded. So I know I have to do some revitalizing of the soil in that area because I want to grow more food. And I still have plenty of sunflowers out front. I probably have about 30, close to 30 sunflowers. But there's a certain area that's doing really well with sunflowers and other areas that it's just not doing great at all. The sunflowers are all dead. The seeds that I put anew out there, they haven't germinated. So we're working on that now. We're gonna come in with a nice influx of nutrients, soil protection, and we can use how the sunflowers did as just like a test run for how my vegetables would have done. I would have felt really bad if my vegetables I put in, they just died back and I didn't do right by them, and I didn't get as much food as I would have planned for. So the sunflowers, if they grow, cool, they attract pollinators, but I would have been upset if I didn't get the food that I prepped for and planned for. But just taking practices in how to become self-sufficient, how to live off the land, regenerative gardening. Stop taking, and never giving back. You want to take, you have to give. Only the selfish person just wants to take. And conventional farming does exactly that. Just takes, and just degrades the soil. And it's ruining farmland. But it can be revitalized if it's starting to grow in a different way. So I'm taking out all this stuff here, and I'm not even going to create the problem of taking from the soil. There's another conversation that people were saying about crop rotation. I'm in a little bit of a different mindset and disagreements in having the need for crop rotation. I don't think there's a need for crop rotation if you constantly give back to your soil, constantly adding in compost and nutrients each year. And it could be something as simple as, adding weeds, grass, and leaves. Something that simple. I want a spot where I just want to grow peppers every year. I'll grow peppers every year in that same spot. There's people that are just like, oh, your plants absorbed the nitrogen that was there, so now you have to put in things that are nitrogen fixers, either with soil cover during the non-growing season, or put in beans in that spot next year, where things that just add nitrogen to the soil, which all that's cool, but I really don't try to get into being too scientific. I just try to become more in tune with nature. And nature, like I said, just takes care of itself. You learn to pay attention. One of the biggest things is keen observation. Okay, you want to grow food in a certain place. What's going on in that area? Is there already plants growing in that area? How well are they growing? Is the soil exposed? If the soil is exposed, it needs to not be exposed. Let's start there. If something is growing, what's growing? How well and prolific are they growing? Is there only a certain type of thing that is able to grow there? Because there are certain plants or weeds that will only grow in certain conditions. There are certain plants that, in harsh conditions, certain ones that will thrive in harsh conditions. And then getting rid of those weeds when you're ready to start growing. Of course, you want to get those weeds out of there. You don't want them necessarily competing with your vegetables, but I like to just pay attention and see what are the weeds telling me. Because for me, the weeds talk to me. The weeds tell me, like, is this ground good for growing in? Okay, yeah, there's some weeds here. Okay, we can grow here, but what does it need? The weeds tell me. Nature talks to you. We're almost done here, and I'm gonna go transfer this to the front. So I cleaned up this area right here. All right, so let's get a better view. Okay, so for the most part, I just cleaned up all the weeds out of this area. I just cleaned up all the weeds over here, and got a Mexican sunflower that was left in that area. I'm going to leave that there. But yeah, so let's go move these weeds to where we need them to go. Okay, so I'm in my front yard food forest. I got a lot of stuff growing, and I'm now laying down some of this mulch and grass clippings and these weeds, not grass clippings, but just grass that I took out. So I'm gonna lay a lot of these weeds out that I just picked from my other area and just kind of layer this over here right in front of where I have the wood chips. Because there's only grass growing over here in this area anyways. So this is just going to die and snuff everything out and keep this area nice and covered. So just keep layering it down. And like I said, it's going to settle. So do not be afraid to put a nice hefty amount. And as more weeds grow, you come back and layer it again. It's all good. And this is laying the foundation for next year's growing cycle. But I'm going up until I have where I have these arborist wood chips. So I'm not going to be on top of the wood chips. Already growing this stuff right here. Dump the rest of that out. Just a nice even layer. Cover everything up. Pat it down. And I'm going to go pick some more weeds and continue with laying the foundation for next year. But that's it. That's how I do it. That's one way how I do it. Good talk, good rant. Hope you learned something. Please subscribe and like.